Achebe once said that the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely the problem of leadership. He was correct, and up till now, he still stands correct. It's just that his claim looks rather simplistic, as he was just focused more on the political landscape of the country, which is still a thing worthy of doing, since the reason why he had written the trouble with Nigeria, as at the time he wrote the book, was due to the political unrest and corruption the country had gone through greatly. But I stand here to tell you today that the problem and the trouble with Nigeria is still simply and squarely the problem of leadership. But leadership not in the narrow sense, leadership on 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 many fronts, leadership on a whole lot of fronts. Because if we put everything down on the leaders of a country without we ourselves being responsible in many ways, a country seemingly cannot work. Those at the helm of affairs have to man their guards and be strong in the policies they get to make for the well-being of the society and the people. But that is not all there is to do. If the leaders in a country such as Nigeria gets to do all they have to do, and people are not willing to cooperate with such policies or are not ready yet to live out lives worthy of virtue and of goodwill, it still falls short of the benchmark for the type of leadership we are talking about here. Here we look at leadership from a larger picture, everybody coming into play to see to it that a country gets to work, police officers doing their jobs, the teachers and lecturers of our children and of our various educational sectors actually doing what they have to do, the ministers of roads bestowing roads, the ministers of electricity bestowing that, the ministers of power giving power to the people where needed, the ministers in charge of humanitarian affairs actually seeing to it that such is actually having a front, the ministers of sports and tourism and for the youths actually seeing to it that their ministries are living up to expectation. But in the long run, we have seen to it that these have not been the case. Leaders have fallen short of their roles as leaders. We also as followers have fallen short on many fronts, because we find ourselves also lacking and lagging behind on our duties, on our tasks, and on the things we ought to do and on the things we should, by way of necessity, do. We find lecturers in universities demanding what shouldn't be demanded, and excuses will want to be placed on them, incentives, or they are not well paid, that is why they get to go this way. And I understand the fact that poverty breeds corruption, which still leads me back to the idea of leadership. If those at the helm of affairs get to do what they ought to do at the time they ought to do them and with the rigor they ought to place policies, such a lecturer won't be doing what he or she is doing just to survive, because believe it or not, this lecturer have kids, has children to take care of, have a whole lot of things to do, which the little amount he gets from his pay as a lecturer or as a dispenser of knowledge might not just cover, or will not cover, in the current economy of a country such as Nigeria. So what is the result or the product of such lack by public policies from the educational sector? We see this lecturer going out to do all sort of things just to keep body and soul together and to see that this family gets to move forward. You find students getting materials that they shouldn't get. You find students being put under pressure to do the things they shouldn't do just to pass the exams, and they again go the next problem. Students who paid school fees, or who are under scholarship from different people of goodwill will suffer what shouldn't be suffered in the first place. What would they be suffering? They will be suffering poor education. They will be suffering um, uh, an imbalance in the dispensing of knowledge down to them, which will lead them to say that school and formal education doesn't really make sense, which is not the case. Even public education or formal education makes sense, makes a whole lot of sense, should be encouraged by all means, and policies should be placed whereby everybody is made to be educated, at least to the level of a high school education, if not higher education at that, or vocational training as the case may be. But we don't see that because, you know what, the country is corrupt, and it starts with those at the helm of affairs, which still makes Chinua Achebe's claim that the problem of leadership remains Nigeria's problem. And not just Nigeria's problem, problems for everybody around the world and in different places. It goes down also to the auditor, it goes down to the accountant, it goes down to the chef, it goes down to the police officer who stands by the side of the road to collect bribe from people he is meant to protect, so that the highest bidder can actually just evade being caught for a crime that such definitely would have been caught if things were done diligently. You find also road safety getting to take bribes and do crazy stuff just to see to it that they also get going with life. And this is the problem. This is the problem when leadership is not actually looked at from the top to bottom. A re-education has to be done as it concerns our people, as it concerns we as Nigerians, as it concerns we as Africans, and by extension, we as global citizens of our world. Because believe it or not, without leadership aimed and geared towards the right direction, in line with peace, in line with love, in line with kindness and empathy and sympathy, we're going nowhere. The problems of the world are not problems that money alone can solve. While the myth of money is important in seeing to it that services are rendered to each and sundry in different proportions, we still have to bear in mind that by the time we must have finished falling down trees and cutting and tapping all the latex from rubber plants just to print money and produce different forms of merchandise, we will come to realize that there is more to life than money. Because when you get money, you still need services to be met. You still need to use this money. You can't just ordinarily eat money. It still falls back to say that life goes beyond this. Life is constituted and is supposed to be led by principles such as love, such as kindness, such as meekness, such as integrity, such as truth at the forefront of this. But that is not the case. So we as a people still have to look at the idea of leadership from a holistic standpoint on what is this. You as a teacher, do what you are meant to do. You as a student, don't say education is a scam. Actually read your book. You as an administrator, be administrative enough in virtue. You as a plumber, carry out your tasks diligently. You as a bricklayer, build buildings and structures that are up to the ethical standards of such structures, and see to it that they get to last and actually are not left to be substandard structures that will still, one way or the other, affect humanity. You as a religious leader, the tax here fall on you a whole lot, because most persons would easily listen to a religious leader than will listen to a poet or a philosopher or even their lecturers. And sometimes, not just sometimes, most times in Africa, will listen to their religious leaders more than they will even listen to their spouse, to their parents, to their guardians, to their psychologists if we have any in Nigeria, and even to the government authorities and the authorities that get to even govern the country. So religious leaders have to be up and doing in a continent such as Africa to see to it that people are actually told the basics of life and how life ought to go. But that is not the case. The case here is that religious leaders in our part of the world have fallen below the benchmark of what they ought to do and how they ought to live. So what do we get in return? We get a caricature, a display of profundity, a display of stupidity and shame in the name of forms of worship and forms of religious practices across different countries in a continent such as Africa. We have to wake up as a people. If we must practice religion, we must do it rightly. And at the moment, I'm sorry to say, my brothers and sisters, religion is badly practiced in Africa. Despite the limitations that religion have on its own on a broader scale, we still need to look at how best we can, mitigate the errors and the abuses and the excesses that can actually still come out from such branch of our life, such an important branch of our life. And until we do that, we labor in vain. And I will continue to say that a thing as important as religion, a thing that cuts across different geographical positionings and different walks of life, a thing that gets to bring people together, those who actually understand what they are doing and those who are just looking for an opium, or those who are looking for succor, those who are looking for comfort in a world that is so crazy and confusing and mind-blowing. Religion shouldn't just be left to the hands of charlatans, to the hands of maniacs and people who just feel so entitled, and people with corrupt practices and people that have no integrity. And we find them a whole lot in Africa, and we find them also in the world. And these people wield this stuff very badly, and it stings the devil. And it's so annoying that a thing that has the potentiality of making a country or a people go south or go north is just left to chance, and anybody just wakes up in Nigeria and just creates a church and just creates a gathering in the name of freedom of worship, and then begins to spill out a whole set of nonsense in the name of doctrines, and you find all forms of abnormalities in the name of preaching and sermons and messages, people claiming to be so metaphysically vested when actually they can't even deal with cosmological concepts and ideas. It's so sad. It speaks of how we cannot really make progress, because most persons will still find their way to these churches, and their minds, the minds of humans, can be easily swayed and moved and made to believe whatsoever it wants to be believed, especially if education has not really been given the full chance and the opportunity it gets to be given. I am always scared of the continent when I go online to listen to sermons by so-called men of God and women of God and priests, pastors, bishops, and what have you. At least to those who speak and to those who at least put out their message there for public consumption. Thank God for the mass media that has made it possible for us to listen to most of the nonsense people get to say and churn out in churches in the name of homilies. I just can only imagine how the God these religions claim to stand for would just really feel, because every Sunday, every week, every other day I get to hear a whole lot of heresies for the Christian folk, who get to, churn out a whole lot of things on the internet in the name of claiming to be very sophisticated. If your gospel cannot be cited within the realms of peace, within the realms of love, within the realms of harmony, meekness, kindness, forgiveness, tolerance, and the likes of this, and the possibility of people getting to actually change from good to bad and making that progress slowly or fast, depending on how the grace bestowed upon them is cooperated with by these persons in question, I don't know what you are doing in the name of having a church. We have too many churches, and that leads me also to talk about the so-called prosperity gospel and the likes of that. Religion, if it means anything and if it should hold water in our world and in our time, has nothing typically to do with making you rich. Getting money within the mythological framework of what money is in the 21st century demands you having services to render to people, and people are being ready to, get to patronize these services you are rendering, thereby having a change or an exchange of goods and services, and payments for such can come into play as a way and as an incentive to see to it that people get to move forward. But when you find a preacher comes to tell you, like, oh, it's always done, come and donate to me, and then I will pray to God so that you get a car. It's very, very laughable. If it's so easy to get a car without getting a job or without actually getting money, the preacher should have just called on God to give him the car. A car is a cosmological concept. It's a concept within the confines of the realities of our time and of our world. It has nothing to do with seed sowing. We can talk about that from a metaphysical standpoint, but for the sake of our conversation today, we just stick to the deception most of these guys get to put up in the name of hearing from God. And I begin to ask, which language do they actually use when they try to hear from God, when they try to listen from God? Who speaks to them? How is the message being converted? How is the message sounded to them? And this God, does he speak only to them? Can't it be made, can't he, if there's his gender, I still said it again, can't God be so simple enough to say the basic things he needs to be said? I find it annoying, I find it disturbing that men and women of God, rather than telling the people what they need to hear, support your pastor as far as possible, you get to see these guys coming to lay claims, the claims like the first fruit of the month, which happens now to be January. You just get to hear guys say, in January you have to bring your tithe and you have to bring your offering, you have to bring all your salaries, they are for me. And there was a charlatan who trended in the month of January this year, about 4 months ago, in January, claiming to be a custodian of the mouth of God, and saying, your January salary is for me, it's for this stomach, it's for this body, it's for this oracle. And I don't laugh about this stuff, because they are serious issues. These are places people get to see to it that their creativity is either halted or expanded or managed well. These religious gatherings are places that can either mar a person or make a person, and we shouldn't look at this with levity, with a mind of anyhowness. We should really pay serious attention to this, and until we do that, we still continue to labor in vain. We would continue to remain where we are, and these so-called ministers of God and the gospel would continue to exploit the people. Because why I say this and why I'm so concerned about this is that in a scale of 1 to 20, 18 out of these numbers of ministers are either fake or poorly inclined towards the truth, lack love, no sense of sympathy and kindness and meekness and the likes of that. And it speaks to how a society can grow. I'm not saying religion should be stage managed by the government, but there should be regulations set in place to actually get to know what goes on around the walls of religious gatherings and the gatherings that seem to have occultic inclinations to them and the likes of such, because the well-being of everybody is important. Just imagine if somebody has gone to such a church or such a mosque where this false gospel of life and gospel of how to grow, and then comes out one day, which happens on a daily, comes to encounter the real world. He doesn't see what he was told, because he will not see that. Why won't he see that? Because the world doesn't work like that. If you need a car, you work for and make money to get a car. If you want to be successful, you have to be patient enough to build a brand, to work for some amount of time, or to render legitimate services to people, or to a nation, or to a group of people, or to yourself even. And from there you can earn, because that's how the mythological concept of money we have now gets to work. But no. In Nigeria and in Africa and in most parts of the world, we are told that, we can get it very fast. We can get it anyhow. And that is the problem. That is the problem. So what happens here? We find youths who go about deceiving themselves and believing in the fact that they can make wealth without enterprise. They can make wealth without integrity. They can make wealth just being fraudulent. And there's a rise of email scam as never before, and it's being celebrated in our music, in art, and particularly in skits. You get to hear a whole lot of persons normalizing this. If it's not somebody being called Pablo, it's somebody being praised for all sorts of nonsense. And this also goes to tell how our leadership structures have fallen apart, and how we are leading poor lives as a people, how we are leading poor lives as a country, as a continent, and in fact as a global community, making it very difficult for those who want to genuinely climb the ladder of success the traditional way and the normal way, steeped in virtue, steeped in truth, with a heart open for service and commitment to oneself, to a community, to the nation, to a continent, to the world at large, making such persons look stupid because they toil and toil and toil. Things and prices of stuffs are just going high. This also allows me a chance to talk about the necessity and the basics of life. What life entails for survival are basic stuffs: a balanced diet, a shelter over one's head, a house warm enough to keep winter away, or a house warm enough to keep the harmattan a bit away, jackets to cover for cold, singlets to wear in times of heat, and basic amenities such as running water, drinkable water, gas to gas to cook, gas to power our plants and the likes of this, roads to comfortably commute from a place to place, security for one and for all, not just for political leaders or rather political talks. We seem to have forgotten the basics of life, and these are just the basics of life, to mention a few like we've done. Love in our hearts and trust for our neighbors. These are all the things we are meant to have before we begin to talk of the machines that have made life very easy. These also are important, but not always necessary. It is important to make calls. It is important to get phones that can probably capture moments that are very memorable, but they shouldn't become the norm. We seem to live in a time where we make luxury a norm rather than what it's supposed to be. Luxury is optional. The basics of life have been left outside, and we've perpetually come to remain very anxious because we cannot go anywhere, we cannot move forward, because each time we try to think we've arrived, each time we try to think we've come to a particular conclusion as to what life should be and we try to be happy, we discover new ways to distract ourselves. It seems that Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, had already foreseen the future, and it is the case that is what actually happens when a thing like history happens to always repeat itself, just changing characters. Nothing is going to change from George Orwell's 1984 to Animal Farm to Dostoevsky, The Idiot, the Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, and Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, and the likes of this. Not even the predictions of Chinua Achebe and his essays and the likes of that, or the works of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, or the letter of Mariam Abba. Nothing is going to change if we don't actually learn from history. And we still fail over and over again to learn from this beautiful experience that has come to be called history, this beautiful set of realities and facts that we ordinarily ought to learn from. What do? Rather than learning from history, we try to remake history. We cannot remake history. History has happened, it has happened. If somebody's father was killed 10 years ago, it cannot change. The person's father has been killed. If somebody didn't make money 5 years ago, it doesn't change anything in our modern times that person didn't make money. Trying to change such a thing as such history is very, very laughable, because it's not going to change. Our duty is not to change history. Our duty and our responsibility as a people here is to see to it that history is learned from, the good and the bad. That's what constitutes history. Same thing with us. We shouldn't lay claims to the merits of our good actions, and for the demerits we blame it on our weakness or we blame it on the devil. I, as Biringkpa Obinnemeka, I am made to understand that I am myself at the very moment where I lay claims to my weakness and my strength, because this is what complements me. Be the case that some see evil as privation or some see weakness as weakness. I see weakness as strength, because it reminds me of my fragility and the likes of that. And that is how we ought to go. We should accept ourselves, and we should also see our history in the light of this. And this is how we as a people can move forward, we as a people can grow. Without this, we deceive ourselves. We ought to learn from history, and if history has anything to teach us, is that fake pastors and prosperity gospel is going nowhere and is taking the continent of Africa and the world at large nowhere. We have to embrace the dignity of labor, the fact that there's dignity and there's prestige, and there's a rare privilege to have the chance of working, be it in whatever sector one gets to work, that still upholds one's dignity as a person and upholds the dignity of the next man. We as a people have to be told that, and if we fail to realize this particular fact, we will just labor in vain, and we will just deceive ourselves, and we will just be so stupid as we've come to be stupid. And my special shout out goes out to religious leaders who are trying their very best to see to it that integrity is upheld in places of worship, in places that speaks of the divine, that should take one to a metaphysical framework or a realm that is almost different from our cosmological experience and daily encounters of life. Because if we don't encourage those who do well, everybody begins to do what shouldn't be done. And if you are a bad minister, if you have somebody, if you know a friend, if you know your pastor, if you know your imam, if you know your ifa, if you know your afa, if you know your dibia, if you know the leader of your religious cult, if you know your priest, if you know your bishop who is erring, feel free to approach these persons. They are not demigods. They are as human as humans can be. The Pope goes to toilet, same as you and I. The president uses the restroom, same as you and I. So if our leaders are going short and living below the benchmark of what leadership should actually be, it rests on us to actually tell them this. We shouldn't see them as demigods. We shouldn't see them as what they are not. We should see them for what they are. And what are they? They are humans. They are weak. They are fragile. They cry. They weep. They are confused as we also can be confused. That is why life remains beautiful. Because the rich and the poor gets to cry. The powerful and the weak, so-called, gets to cry also. They get to feel pain. They get to feel betrayal. They get to feel unrest. They get to have a sense of distress and all that. That is why we are humans. That is why it is important that we don't forget this fact that we are humans and everybody is fallible. Everybody is capable of making mistakes. And everybody can make a U-turn or can continue going towards the direction of virtue, towards the direction of peace. And everybody is also still capable of, just fucking things up and messing things up. Until we tell ourselves this truth, until we hold ourselves accountable, from our leaders to our parents to our brothers and sisters, we labor in vain.